So you guys, I'm here at an IMAX theater in Kyle, Texas, near Austin, to see the re-release of Interstellar. This movie came out 10 years ago. I have not seen it on the big screen, especially not IMAX, how it's intended to be seen. And this has been a very successful re-release so far. And of course, it's a space-related movie. So this is my first ever Ellie in Space movie report. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so this movie came out on October 26, 2014 to be exact. It's 169 minutes. It is a Christopher Nolan film, and it is probably the best space movie to exist. I don't know, I may get ruined in the comments for saying that, but it's a very popular movie, and so I'm hoping to get people's reactions about this. But so far in just one weekend, the re-release has earned $4.5 million, which is pretty crazy. So we'll see how packed the theater is. Thank you. If you don't butter your popcorn, what's wrong with you? Is that an Ellie in Space shirt?
Yeah.
2 hours later.
This is your first time seeing it?
Yes.
What'd you think?
I don't really know how to feel. Like the music, the visuals, the shots, the storyline, how it went off center from what sci-fi normally is, but still had a basis of sci-fi. And that's really my thoughts. It was amazing. 10 out of 10.
Was it your first time?
It was not, no. Really? First time in theater, but honestly, it's still a lot to wrap your head around even now. I feel like you understand bits and pieces more, but obviously, there's still a lot that's you have to unpack.
What about you? Is it your first time?
Fifth time seeing it.
Fifth? It's a long movie, so you must really like it if you've seen it this many times.
Yep.
Why do you like it so much?
I don't know. I think it's like the connection, that whole like fatherly love connection thing that it has going on too. I think I can relate to that a lot. So
I've seen this movie like again 5 or 6 times.
Wow.
But this is my first time in IMAX.
And how different was it? Like,
It was honestly really different. It was really nice seeing the movie on such a big screen. It was really nice seeing all those different planets. That was my favorite part of the movie. That and the soundtrack, of course. But
yeah,
it was really cool picking up on all the Easter eggs and I guess references to what's gonna happen in the future in like plot lines and stuff like that. It's definitely a movie you gotta watch 2 or 3 times.
Yeah,
if not more.
And it's so loud in IMAX. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, I could feel the sound in my ribs.
Yeah,
that was really cool.
Yeah, it felt like we were going through space.
Yeah.
Break it down.
Okay, so we just saw Interstellar in IMAX. It's my second time seeing it. It's your second time seeing it as well.
Second, yeah.
I don't remember exactly when I watched it. I think it was a few years ago. It was nice to see it for a second time. I still feel like there's parts where you may need to assist me. But one of the problems that I had is it was hard to understand some of the dialogue. I feel like we're very reliant on closed captions, and so I was quite frustrated a few times because I just couldn't understand what they were saying.
I think Christopher Nolan gets that a lot in the movies. They don't like the sound mixing. For whatever reason, I don't have a problem with it, and that includes in Tenet. But yeah, so Tenet got a lot of insults around that. Christopher Nolan has really defended his sound mixing, saying it's more experiential. I do agree there's some parts that are hard to hear, I guess, but I don't really have that much of a problem with it, which is weird because I have bad hearing.
I have a problem with it because there's so much that you have to wrap your mind around with this movie. Like, with sort of like, okay, he's communicating, like you're having to wrap your mind around, okay, well, this was in the past, but he's still in the future and he's able to like understand the past or, communicate with the past. Or when Murphy went to the hospital bed of Brant's father, and, found out this pretty shocking revelation, I couldn't understand his last words.
Got it, yeah.
And so it was like, okay, this is a big thing that just happened and I can't pause it and rewind or whatever. Right. So anyway, but yeah.
That's common criticism. That's common criticism for almost all Christopher Nolan movies made after The Dark Knight, essentially.
Yeah, like the music is so loud.
Yeah. And he defends it too. It's not a mistake. Like, that's his style.
Okay, well, let's get into the movie, right? Okay. This is, obviously many of you have probably seen Interstellar. I definitely recommend seeing it, although I wish there were like captions or
How
something.
did you feel about it then?
What, just the movie?
The movie, yeah.
I don't know how I feel about it.
Give it a hot take. How did you feel about it?
Like, it's very long. However, I don't think it felt as long as the actual runtime is. It's a lot to wrap your mind around because they're dealing with theoreticals and then Matthew that are hard for humans could actually look and feel like. And so one thing that was really interesting about this movie, sorry to give an anecdote, but this is the one movie that kind of made my dad like lose it, like get very emotional, cry. I've never seen him get that way. And he called me after watching it very distraught. And I don't think that he'll mind that I'm sharing it. And so I don't know if it hits differently as a parent. I tried to, really watch it this time with more intention, especially knowing that that's, how my dad perceived it. But I think it really does, give you this, existential feeling of just, especially as I've met a few astronauts now and people like Jared Isaacman, who I think is quite brave, but, hasn't gone nearly as far as the characters in this story. And it's really interesting, sort of like the moral conundrums that you find yourself in many of the scenes, and characters getting left behind or dying. And then it was definitely an emotional movie. I did not cry this time, but
yeah, I had the same experience with other people I've known, particularly in the older like X and Boomer generations. If they get into this movie, it breaks them pretty hard. It can hit them pretty hard. And I've known quite a few people now who have said kind of similar things of like, they really bawled at this movie. This got them like pretty hard. And we saw some younger people who were crying pretty profusely throughout this movie in the theater.
Yeah, which means that, they could grasp what was going on. Okay, so in case you live under a rock and for some odd reason you haven't seen Interstellar in the past decade because it just turned 10 years old, we thought we'd give you a very rough summary. And basically, we have our star, Matthew McConaughey, and we're on a planet Earth that is in pretty bad shape. And they're having some dust problems and some famine, and they're not able to produce food. In fact, many of the crops they're not able to produce at all anymore, and they're kind of left with corn, and that's getting pretty corny. No, I'm kidding. That's not going to work for very long, and so humanity is really at kind of the crossroads that Elon Musk is always warning us about. Why he wants us to get to Mars is that if there is no plan B here on Earth to make things work, what do? Well, we need to find another place where humanity can be sustained, and that's where we have this,
Protagonist steps up and duty calls, and the movie then continues from there.
And so he basically has the training, has some experience in order to, have NASA choose him sort of covertly to go and explore other worlds to see if we can sustain humanity, and you get to see what it would be like for an astronaut to go to several different planets, even different galaxies. I mean, it really is. I love being able to it's one thing to visualize it, or what will it be like when we send someone to Mars, but like to have it like so well done, it was truly like captivating.
I think that's a good synopsis. I think there's a lot to break down in the movie too, where it comes to like the originality of how these planets are rolling is quite interesting. I mean, the first planet, the water planet, that one's the time dilation in that one is so. It's such a cool concept.
So, and this is for the rough summary. This whole video has spoilers, so maybe go watch it and then come back to us. But the rough summary is that, he has to leave his kids behind. His kids aren't tiny little kids, they're teenagers, and 10 years old is his daughter, and she's really mad at her dad for leaving. She's really mad. He says that he'll come back to see her, but
understandably so. She's that's the thing is you both understand. To me, it's like you understand the character motivation of why Matthew McConaughey, our protagonist, would leave, and you understand Jessica Chastain. Yeah, I think that's right. Why her motivation of why she doesn't want her father to leave. It's character motivations perfectly line up. Makes sense.
Right, and so as we get to this first planet, some things go wrong, and the problem is that 1 hour costs you 7 years on planet Earth. So Matthew McConaughey's not aging, but his kids sure are, and that causes, a lot of problems, and you really feel for this character, Cooper, being so helpless.
Yeah.
I think it's a really fun thought experiment. I'm sure you guys, pretty much all of you have seen it, but even if you rewatch it, with what we're, watching SpaceX unfold, kind of the very beginnings of this journey to, go to Mars, for example, it's really interesting just to, feel the empathy for these characters who, if something goes wrong with the equipment, with a crew member turning against you, there's all sorts of variables. And just you have to adapt and overcome, or you're done. And there were many instances I felt like even Matthew McConaughey, his character, didn't plan for, didn't account for, and you can just really understand the helplessness that these characters feel. They're stuck on that first planet that has I don't even know how tall those waves were. They were stuff of nightmares. These big, big waves just crashing down, and they can't get off. And so they're, wasting decades back on Earth, and there's nothing they can do about it. And
now you haven't necessarily answered though. How'd you feel about the movie? What's your opinions of the movie?
Well, visually, it was very, very captivating. This idea that, you're able to, especially in the IMAX with the surround sound and everything, experience how it would sound and feel in a way to go through a wormhole and then through a black hole and then be in this, different dimension of time and space and being able to access the past. So I think, visually, it was incredible. I think, the story, I think you have to be at, a certain age, and even me at 32, it's a complicated thing to wrap your... Either I'm stupid, or it's just a complicated storyline, especially if you can't hear all of the dialogue, and you can't rewind it. So I don't know. I don't really feel like I have a great opinion.
What is your opinion of it, though? Well, so I think it's an interesting movie. I love this movie. I think this is a fantastic movie. It's one of my favorite sci-fi movies, and sci-fi is kind of one of my favorite genres, probably my favorite genre. But what's weird about the movie is that there's a lot of things that work that I'm okay with that normally I wouldn't be okay with. So, me, I'm really big into writing. That's my thing when I watch a movie. I'm like, how's the basic storyline? And honestly, you can mess up almost all the CGI. You can mess up huge portions of the movie, but if you don't get the writing down very strong, then I have a problem with it. And there's parts of this movie where I kind of give it a lot of leeway in its writing, which I normally wouldn't do for it, because there's some things that I think actually kind of don't line up perfectly, but I think they have the characters really strong, and I think they have the motifs very strong. And there's certain things I'm shocked that I'm okay with. One of those is they have this choice in the movie, right? In the beginning of the movie, you have basically older people explaining how the Dust Bowl was. And this is, them explaining the Dust Bowl, and they make it sound like they're explaining the time they're going through in the movie. And they're splicing this over in the beginning of the movie. If I were to see this in a screenplay or hear someone did this in a film, I would say that is a terrible idea. I love it in this movie. I think it's excellent. I think it's perfectly used. It doesn't draw me out of the movie, and I'm all about it. I'm okay with those parts, and it's the same thing when you get to the part where you have Anne Hathaway, who's kind of giving her motif about, love transcends space and time and whatever. And it's almost, if I were to read it in a screenplay, I'd say that's the dumbest monologue I ever heard. She gives it, and I'm like, I get that. And then you get into the end part, right, where like you're at the end of this movie, and he returns back to Earth, or let's say the space stations around Saturn, and you know, some things where it's like, or even when he's communicating with his daughter through the black hole or through the Tesseract, and she's like, it's you, it was you, and it's like, well, how would she know that? And it's like, it's kind of set up beforehand though that this is about a love transcending time and space thing. Same thing with like, he kind of ends up, you know, on the planet, and it's sort of weird where he goes and he meets his daughter, who's now on her deathbed, and he kind of just meets her and is like, hey, kisses her hand, and all the rest of the family is like, oh, this guy. Well, it's like, no, clearly there'd be like, dude, you know, you're Coop, you know,
I was surprised by the lack of reaction.
Yeah, but it's almost like, for some reason, I give this movie a lot of passes on those, because it's like, I sort of get it. The point isn't the reaction to, oh, wow, you're back here. The point of it is the father-daughter relationship and that transcending to like a different dimension in many ways. And in that sense, I almost feel like I give the movie some excuses and some of the things that I think are normally really hammer a movie for and say, oh, that doesn't really work. But in this one, I think it works very well in this movie as far as it being like, kind of like, I don't know, it's almost like a emotional slingshot, but it's also, I think it works in the sense that the movie's so bold and takes so many weird choices that it's kind of shocking to me that any of the movie turned out to not just be a jumbled mess, but actually turns out to be way better than that. And in many ways, and you know, Christopher Nolan says this, it's very inspired by 2001: A Space Odyssey, which I love Kubrick.
Which I haven't seen.
But I don't like that movie, actually, and I love sci-fi. And it's weird, but that movie doesn't quite click with me. But I think part of the reasons why is there's certain parts of that movie that sort of have this, it's so grand, I'm not giving it enough leeway in certain parts, particularly the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey. I love the practical effects of this movie. I think they are excellent. I love how they use as much practical effects as they can, and they have to substitute the rest in CGI. And I love their take on it. I love all that take. I love all of Matthew McConaughey, and particularly Anne Hathaway. I love Anne Hathaway. I think she's great, and I think this role, she crushes it. So I think they really got the acting down pat. And there's some scenes in this movie that are just, it's almost like, there's some scenes that are so excellent, they resurrect the rest of the movie, where I give it a lot of passes. You know, of course, there's the famous scenes that kind of you are now made a meme of and everything, but it's like him watching the videos of his son and his daughter getting older after they get off of Miller's planet and time has elapsed. But the scene I love is right before that, when they enter and they have their black crewmate who's been sitting there for 23 years or whatever, and that interaction is so golden. It's so perfect. I love it. And I love the conflict you have of Anne Hathaway and her guilt about it, and then Matthew McConaughey's frustration about the situation. It's just, and it's so hard to explain that to an audience, but I think they explained it perfectly. And the dilution of time that this film does is, it's not only just an interesting concept, but it's also, they're able to put the backbone of a father-daughter relationship and the humanity of it so firmly that I think I think Christopher Nolan just nails it. I think it's near perfectly done. I also love when they go to Man's Planet and you get into more of the motif of, you know, you get past the motif of love transcends everything, and you get back into the motif of survival. And I love that one too, and I love the dark turn of how the plan wasn't actually to ever save humanity. It was just to get the embryos to another planet and restart. And to me, it's like, not only do I like that, because that twist makes way more sense. It's like, what are you going to do? Start launching rockets off when we don't have enough food to feed people? So that's actually like a logical thing to do. Yeah, Matt Damon kind of explains it too, and it's like, it fits the motif perfectly to have the reveal happen there, because it's like, you know, he's like, yeah, like humans, we haven't gotten to this consciousness to where we can actually have empathy for these people we don't see, and we're always going to choose ourselves and the people we can see over these people, this blanket idea of these people we can't see, and this idea. And it's like, that's exactly what the original scientists thought, with like, hey, you know, he's not actually saving these people and whatever, and this is like, but you have to unite humanity and NASA to basically lie to employees, because otherwise they won't work for a mission if they don't think it's going to save them and their kids.
Well, I was going to say, this isn't our NASA, because he went pretty quickly from just randomly ending up at those that location to, you know, fuck it,
Yeah.
screw it, send it. I'm going. Like, I trained for this, who knows how long ago at that point, and then he was just somehow, I don't know, it seemed like there was really no time to, like, say goodbye to the kids beyond, you know, the daughter being mad at them. I mean, that is not very realistic with today's NASA.
Well, for sure. I mean, I think for me, because that's another thing we'd like talk about with the pacing. Christopher Nolan, one of the things I love about his movies is that he puts you on a bullet train and shoots you through a cinematic universe. And almost all of his movies are like this. And even, I'd say one of his slowest movies is probably Insomnia, but I'd say the second one might be Oppenheimer. But even that for a biopic was like crazy fast. I mean, it was, and you see this within his scene editing, and you see in how they do it. And so you're sitting there, and you're like, wow, dude, you just like got to NASA, and then now you're an astronaut,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, oh, but this is 2 hours and 45 minutes, and they have to go to 2 different planets. They have to enter a black hole. They have to get off Earth. They have to make a farmer, turn into an astronaut. So it's like he doesn't waste any time, and the pacing becomes very weird in that sense. And you kind of roll your eyes, like, oh, sure, you're just become a pilot, but it's at least explained enough to where I can forgive it.
No, I actually kind of like that. I was like shocked that the bulk of the movie is actually the space part, because I thought that they, I haven't seen it in a few years, and I thought that for some reason maybe they'd take more time, on the ground, and they really didn't.
Yeah, and that to me is why I think I forgive the movie for a lot of its shortcomings. And a lot of Christopher Nolan's movies I forgive for some of the shortcomings is that if you're able to get the baseline of like the motifs of the story right, the other stuff you can kind of bypass as long as they don't start hammering and destroying your motif and your character arcs. And so this movie sort of seemed like it edited out all the parts that were sort of fluff. Yeah, you can show more training, but how does that establish your character or give your character a better arc or like create the background of the world? And for the most part, it's like, it doesn't matter. It's sort of like creating the MacGuffin of a story. Here's the Holy Grail, a very important item. It doesn't really matter why it's important, you just know characters have to get it. And explaining any further, sometimes you're just wasting time.
Yeah, right.
And when a movie that is so long, it's already at 2 hours and 2 hours 45 minutes. It's like it's best not to waste our time, and it doesn't feel like a waste a single second. At least to me, I thought that everything the pacing is crazy fast. This is like a sit down, buckle up. This movie's going to move 100 miles an hour.
I was shocked I didn't go to the bathroom.
Yes, and that's the other thing too. This is a movie that, like, if you go to the bathroom,
You're gonna
good
miss.
luck. Good luck.
That was my hesitation. I'm like, I'm literally going to miss, because every time I thought I should go, I was like, but now it's like getting, this is paramount to know. No pun intended.
Yeah, right.
But, on a side note, the theater was almost completely packed on a Sunday, and I think they're only running it for about a week, but for a re-release, it's doing really, really well. And
yeah, I mean, I think I love the idea. That first planet, I think, is such a cool concept. Leaving someone on the ship that's not going to get into the time dilation of them going down is a great juxtaposition to have for your characters to get back there. But it's also this idea of you get to this planet, the time dilation so off, they realize that the signal was basically being sent by someone who was there, and it's like, well, why was the signal being sent out? And it's like, they probably just died a couple minutes ago, and we just got here. And it's like, that's right, they probably are, the body's probably right around here. It's not even decomposed yet. And then, this is one of those fun things, right? But Hans Zimmer did the score on this. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But in that song, they do for that, there's a ticking in it, and each tick in that song is a day on Earth. And so the time signature works out to be tick, 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 it's a day. And so it kind of gives you its cool little thing that's like, that it lines up, it's off by enough to where it's super, super close. And it's another little cool thing. And I love the idea of like where they're coming from as far as the reason that, Anne Hathaway kind of messes it up, essentially. And I understand where she was coming from in her mess up, and I understand exactly where Matthew McConaughey was coming in his mess up. And it's such a great character drama to put the two characters into.
the one thing we'll never get the answer to, but how do those deep sleep chambers work?
Yeah.
Wouldn't your skin be so pruny if you're like a wet?
Yeah.
I was like, what the heck?
Well, we can talk about that a little bit, though. Like, general set design of this movie I find to be like phenomenal.
Yes.
And so the ships aren't so futuristic to where I'm like, oh, whatever. They're very like, they look really like good ships, but they look very dystopian good. And you're dealing with things like the way they sleep. It's not like, oh, you sleep on a white cushion. It's like, no, you get sealed into a plastic bag and filled with water, and it's kind of gross and it's kind of depressing. But it looks very mechanical and it looks very like practical in a way. I love I love the suit design. I love the spacesuits. I love the sleeping chambers. I love the way they were to explain the way these very complicated spaceships work. You get in the first one where it's like, well, why do they spend so much time docking before they even left our solar system? And it's like, because they have to redock later. They're teaching you how the redocking situation works.
Well, I was going to say, I also really liked sort of their equivalent of R2-D2 or whatever, the case and the TARS. When one of them was running, it was like so cute.
Yeah, I really loved it too. And it's funny, but there's this thing that happens in film where it's like, because of 2001, The Space Odyssey, and HAL, every time there's a computer like that mentioned, I always go, well, it's going to betray them. I love the fact that the computer in this one was totally on their side and acted as a computer would that had a good artificial intelligence for humor.
And didn't have a robotic voice whatsoever. It was kind of weird.
Yeah.
I was surprised by that too. It literally sounded like if you close your eyes, you'd think, just a human was in the room.
Yeah.
Where usually they're very, I'm a robotic and yeah.
Yeah, I thought that it was. I thought they did great on this one, and I really like that robot. I think it's a very creative design. It's a very fun design, and I love the personality of it. I thought its jokes were witty to the level of you can understand maybe a computer in a few decades actually having that kind of wit. It wasn't too over the top. They leave that let's say the time dilation water planet, and then they head over and they get into man's planet, and that's basically every single thing in this entire movie. Nothing is going well. I mean, really, the characters are not having an easy time at all, but things really go quite to shit once they get over to man's planet.
Yeah, and so they basically, resurrect man.
He has both of a thing of this longing for, being with people, and he's almost gone somewhat insane on this island. He comes up with this plan to basically get rescued and backstab his rescuers and lie about the fact that his planet is essentially a desolate wasteland. And the original plan was, if you're doing the surveying and you get to one of these planets and it's not good, send your beacon to say it's a bad planet and die alone. That's essentially what the plan was. And he just wasn't able to handle that. And I think it goes, so you switch from this motif that's in the first planet, which is this idea, and it's the overlying idea of the movie, which is the whole, like, there's something we don't understand about love that actually there's actually a basis for its power. And then there is, and then you get into this other one, which is the survival idea. And the survival thing also underpins everything that's happening, humanity's survival and the individual survival of everybody. And that's where kind of man says his argument of like, you can't. You hate the character, and he really does. Matt Damon did a great job of making you hate him. He really is just a slimy little guy. But his plan, it's to some degree, he's a very well fleshed out character. You understand his philosophy about why he's doing what he's doing and what he is doing.
Well, why couldn't they have all gone back together?
They couldn't all go back together because the people he was with, let's say Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway, wouldn't have allowed it. At the very least, they would have said, let's go to Edmund's planet. Because that planet was no good. So he had to lie to them to say this planet is good in order to basically do a double cross so he can steal one of their ships and then use their and then try to go back to
Why? Because he just wanted to go to Earth? He didn't want to risk them not wanting to go? Because he just wanted to save his own ass. That's it. And there is an idea of the survival with it. And like, well, I love however long it took him to wake up, he was just ready to fight and enact his plan. He didn't know if he'd wake up or not, but he was ready to raise some hell.
Yeah, and that's the thing. He had it all worked out. Where he's like, if I ever get woken up from this, I have all the data that I have faked. I have set my computer to self-destruct. I have it all worked out, and it. Then you have your kind of struggle with the two characters. But I think it's great, and I think he did a great job. I really like what they did there, and that leads into my favorite action sequence, which is when he blows up the airlock and they have to stop it from spinning. I don't know exactly what it is. I think it's the idea, like if you ever see Silo, I think it's episode 2 where they have to fix the generator. And that's a whole episode. It's just fixing this fictional generator, and but they lay out how the generator works. They lay out the problems with overheating, and this one is the same thing. It's like they lay out the problems. You already see how the airlock works. You understand that it's now heading towards the planet, and they have to boost it up, and it's just like that. That's all there is to it. It's just characters fighting a fictitious battle against a mechanical problem, and I love that scene. It's one of my favorite scenes in any movie. And then after that, you get into what I would say is probably the most divisive part of the film. You get into the black hole.
That part, when he was with Anne Hathaway, sort of, and then decided to release himself into the hole, I don't know why he did that.
Yeah. Well, so the movie sets it up, and if I was a physicist, I would be able to answer it better. But I assume we can look it up. Was it Newton's third law?
I think so.
I think that's what they were referencing. But, but to me, it's like it doesn't even matter that it's a law of physics as long as it's a law of a movie. Like you set up a fictional world, but I think this is actually like a real, physicists probably rolling their eyes.
But I don't understand why he did that.
Because he had to loosen the weight on there, I believe. Now, why did he go in there instead of being with Anne Hathaway or send a signal? I'm not quite sure. I don't really know. Although I think at that point what was going on is that they were already so far down the death rabbit hole that I don't think it really mattered so much.
So because when he went in there was when he got into that time warp, right? With being able to push on the books and stuff. So you're telling me that we're supposed to believe that he, made the spontaneous decision to go into the black hole, and then he's able to mess around with his daughter's books because he actually goes through the black hole and then evacuates himself in his suit, apparently.
Yep.
And then he's either not conscious or we're not exactly sure, but it seems like he was able to actually touch, physical, real Earth life and mess around with those books. And then we're supposed to believe that he's just found with barely enough remaining oxygen, obviously completely unconscious, and he wakes up in sort of like an O'Neill cylinder colony off of Saturn?
Well, so there's a few things on that. One is that there is a suspension of disbelief that you have to have in it, but it's also the fact that at some point in time, there are no aliens, we figured out how to control gravity, and we basically accelerate our time, and that we built that, and that we're the ones who set the wormhole there, right? And so you get into time paradox problems that basically ruin every time travel movie you can think of, but you almost have to, you think about Terminator, and Terminator's, I
haven't seen it.
Okay, so, everyone else has seen it. You send a robot, the robots to take over in the world, right? So then what they do is that, there's a human hero who's going to grow up and he's going to conquer the robots, right? So what they do is they send a robot back in time to kill that human. Well, if the robot's successful and kills that human, they never would have sent a robot back, and so you get this time paradox immediately. And so in this one, you get into one where, the wormhole wasn't a coincidence. After we understood how to manipulate gravity, we're the ones who put the wormhole there to send them there, and we're the ones who created the Tesseract at some point in time in the future in order to allow these things to happen. Now, you can look at it and that doesn't make sense because if it happened, why would you even work to construct that? But you also get into the same issue that you have with I don't want to spoil it, but it's the same things with Arrival, which is you can nitpick it to a point to where you're why would this happen? Why would this happen? Why would this happen? But it's for the most part, you're dealing with a time dilation that's it's not quite the point. And that's why it's I feel weird about this movie because I give it a lot of passes in its screenplay. But to me, it's that doesn't matter. It's it's the baseline root of what the movie's supposed to be about, which is this idea of love and this father-daughter relationship. But yes, that is the concept. Yes, he detached himself in order to go there. Their plan, Anne Hathaway's plan, was to go to Edmund's planet. And he detached himself in order to lower the weight on the ship, and he fell into a black hole, assuming he would likely die.
And he didn't.
But the reason that he was spit back out and just coincidentally only had a little bit of time off isn't really a coincidence. We planned that to happen, us humans, at some point in time. We planned for him to come out at the other end of the wormhole, and we knew that he would have lived through it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have put him at that end of the wormhole with that much oxygen. We would have done it differently. He always would have survived because we planned that out to happen that way. We humans.
See, it starts getting kind of a lot to take in.
No doubt. And, there's no doubt about it. And, I think that's the thing, is it's out there, and the movie's a very And to me, it's a very experiential movie. It's all about kind of the experience and going through the ride.
Well, how many people do you think, after watching it for the first time, are kind of in my camp of having some plot holes?
I would be shocked if there's any less than 50% of people who are like, I don't know what's going on here, and it doesn't really work for me. I think it's a divisive. It's a very high-rated movie. Where people love this movie, but I don't blame any. I would imagine this is a divisive movie.
Like, I literally wish, and I guess I will put this in, I was wishing in a few areas that I could pause it and, like, not disrupt you and ask you, like, hey, did I understand this correctly? Or, like, what did they say? Or, you know, is this what's intended? But I couldn't.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and there's some things you have to forgive in the movie too. I mean, you know, one is, I mean, like, yeah. But that's the thing is, I can start nitpicking to the movie to the crazy extent. For instance, he has to take all the data from the black hole and the gravitational fields. They have to translate it into binary. Then he has to flip a little thing, a secondhand thing. Wouldn't he simply starve to death before he can transmit that much data? And also, how would he know when she starts recording that data relative to not? But then it's like, again, you're getting away from the movie, and you're nitpicking. To me, it's like you're nitpicking the premise of the movie to the point where it loses all its meaning. And usually, I'm very hard on movies for that. But for me, it doesn't bother me on this one.
Lightning round.
There's one more thing we have to talk about, though.
Okay.
We got to talk about both the IMAX experience, and we have to talk about the musical score.
Okay, it sounds like you want to lead the charge.
Well, what do you have to say? Because I saw you doing some things, and I saw some people in the theater doing the exact same thing you were.
What? Covering my ears?
Covering your ears.
Dude, it was so loud. I was, like, scared I was going to have, like, a
There were many
seizure
people.
or
There were
something.
many people in the theater who were covering. Both the two people to my right, a kid and an older adult, were both covering their ears during parts of this.
I don't know.
You were covering
like,
your ears during parts of
My
it?
head started to hurt, and I was, like, psyching myself out about it. And I was like, is it because of the sound?
Yeah.
Or, you know, is this going to, like, it was so loud. You know, when you go to a concert, you're like, man, I should be wearing earplugs. This is, like, bad for my ears. And I was kind of, like, in that same camp of, like,
Yeah.
is this going to be bad? Especially, like, I mean, they were like destructive sounds. It wasn't like, you know, opera music. It was like, you know, stuff being broken up in space. It was loud and
Yeah. Absolutely.
industrious.
Yeah. I have. I wear earplugs at concerts. I loved how loud this movie is, and I think that the sound system is the reason to go to the theater for it.
Oh, 100%.
It is loud. It is so loud, though.
It's so loud that it's like a 4D movie.
You'll wonder if your seat is shaking because of like a mechanism.
Yeah.
It was completely shaking, and the movie makes no apologies for it. Like, it is as loud as I think the speakers can go.
Which, you know, some movies, they do have shaking effects built in the seats. This did not, but it literally, I mean, you felt the movie.
Yeah.
Which, if you guys like rocket launches, which I'm sure you do, you'd probably really love IMAX because it's something that you feel through your body.
Yeah, which then leads into, I mean, you have two other parts. You have sound design, and then you have, we already talked about the sound mixing with dialogue, but you have the sound design, and then you have the musical score, right? Okay. So you have Hans Zimmer did this musical score, probably the most famous, I don't know what you call them, musical score composers, alive right now. And I'm actually not people love him. He's not my favorite, but this is my favorite score by him, and this is such a good score, I think it's one of my favorite film scores ever made. I love the creative use of an organ as the primary musical instrument in this, and I think it's outstanding. I think it sounds so good, and it's so haunting, and it's so 2001: A Space Odyssey.
I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah. Well,
maybe I need to. I watched 10 minutes and I thought it was kind of boring and weird.
Yeah. I mean, I think the score in this one's great. I don't know if you like the score a lot. I'm not sure.
Stay, S-T-A-Y is the name of the song. And then I think it's like Cornfields or something. Mm-hmm. I've listened to both those songs a lot.
Yeah.
Like 1 hour loop of Stay. It exists on YouTube. It's just an hour loop of the same song, and I've used it for like homework or like, you know, busy work or whatever.
I think it's one of the best I've ever heard. I think it's one of my favorite scores I've ever heard in a film. I think it works perfectly in this film, and I think if you want it blasted into your ears, then go to IMAX to see it. You also get into the other thing, which would be kind of your sound design and everything, which again, I think this movie is near perfect in it. And that would be like mainly the use of, it's a juxtaposition between extremely loud and complete quiet. And you're in the vacuum of space and it's just quiet. There's nothing. And then as soon as you get into a situation where, you're now within the oxygen of the cab or whatever, it's super loud. It's crazy loud, and it really just hits you. Like, as I saw you flinch when the airlock blew up. And it's like, but that's the way to do it. As soon as the airlock blew up, you get the explosion, then it's complete silence. It's like you're in the vacuum of space. And a lot of times in a lot of sci-fi movies, you do have that thing, you're like, oh, here's the explosion of the space station, and you see it's like, right? And it's like, no, that doesn't happen. And I think the use of making everything quiet except for these very loud, blaring scenes is, it's so good. I'm
actually surprised that you haven't seen it more than just twice now, because those kids that we interviewed were young men or whatever.
Yep.
2 of them had seen it like 5 times, which is damn commitment.
Yep.
That's like, 15 hours of watch time.
Yep.
In YouTube terms.
This is an interesting fact as well. But I'm very interested in how directors and cinematographers film car scenes, right? How you're going to... Everyone does it differently, and everyone has a style for how you do it. And it's actually a very complicated process because a lot of, it's gotten easier, but how in the hell do you fit a camera in a car? And do you go straight on? How do you do the dialogue scenes? And this one, I think they used, I want to say it was drone tracking shots on these cars going through the cornfields. Fun fact, the cornfields, they actually planted them for this movie, and they sold the corn afterwards, and they actually made a profit on these cornfields. But they were planted for this movie.
Where were they?
I don't know exactly where they were, but they were. But anyways,
what about that second planet, the man planet?
Yeah.
Where was that? Well, was it just all artificial, or was that like terrain somewhere?
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Usually it's like they create somewhat of a set, and so that they're standing on real stuff that looks like it, and then they green screen everything else in.
Wow. Generative fill AI.
I think the driving through the cornfields and everything, I think was so well shot. There's this one shot they use where it looks like they're duct taping the camera to the side of the car that I love, and I rarely see it. I think it looks great.
All right. Well, wrapping up, what would you rate the movie out of 10?
What would you rate it?
Just because I mean, it's a movie that really makes you think, and I want to say I did cry the first time. I didn't cry this time. I guess I was empty, but maybe like an 8 or 9.
Yeah. I think that I actually did tear up about this, but I don't even cry at sad parts. I just cry when I'm like, what a great movie. It's like looking at a beautiful picture, right? And for me, this movie basically accomplished everything it set out to do. It was one of the most ambitious movies I've seen because I think what it tried to do was very risky and it's a very hard thing to do. And I think it hit all those beats perfectly. It's,
so
tough for me to give a movie a 10, but I'd probably give this movie a 9 to a 9.5. I think it's one of my favorite sci-fi movies, and I think that Christopher Nolan hit the mark completely at what he was trying to do. And this is a movie that I loved. I loved nearly every second of it.
Is it the best space movie?
That's a tough one. I don't know about that.
That means it's not.
I don't know.
All right.
It's one of, to me though, this is a movie that, like for instance, another sci-fi movie I just adore is Arrival. And if I'm thinking about like recent sci-fi movies, I love Arrival as well. But for Arrival, if it had an IMAX re-release, I would say, no. If you have a big TV, watch Arrival at home. You're gonna get what you're gonna get out of it in theater. This movie is not that way. This is a movie that I actually do think it lends a lot to being seen in theaters. And there's not many movies I'd say that with. The last movie I actually kind of felt that with was actually probably Mad Max Furiosa and Mad Max Fury Road. Those movies are really good in cinema. They're big spectacles that need loud noises.
So this was, a very limited re-release, but probably, I guess Coraline re-released over the summer and was like massively successful, over $50 million in the box office. So we'll see what the tally is at the end of this. But, if you haven't watched it, watch it. And hopefully you guys enjoyed our first movie review here on Ellie in Space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hopefully you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. And we'll have another movie review of October Sky next.